It's extremely rare to be alive to witness a seminal moment of history. Many these days complain about being too young to explore the world, delve deep into uncharted territory, encountering new peoples and geographic features never before met. Others complain about being too young to explore the galaxy, meeting alien life, and seeing land and starscapes no human eye has witnessed in our multi-million-year history. What none of these ingrates realize is that the most important historical event of all time occurred underneath our very noses. At least if you're over the age of 10, that is. My, how time does fly past. In the twilight moments of the noughts, 6.8 billion people bore witness to the cinematic splendor and majesty that was Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen. Never before had the craft of filmmaking been turned into beautiful art. The Pieta would be torn down and a statue of Dickbot the Blender Guy was erected in its place. The Great Pyramids of Giza were ripped to shreds. That's right, the only thing fake about that scene was Devastator. On their foundations, the bricks would be reshaped to make a pair of giant wrecking balls. The Smithsonian Museum would have an interactive Get Tased in the Nuts exhibit in every bathroom. But there were two characters in the film who would eclipse all the rest. Welcome to Kit Katastrophe. My name is Kit, and today we'll be taking a look at Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen, Deluxe Class, Autobot SKIDS, and MUDFLAP. These figures were released in 2009 as part of Wave 4 of the Deluxe assortment. Ding-a-ling, come out and get your ice cream. SKIDS and MUDFLAP, in their infinite progressiveness, commit an historic first for Transformers. This is, to my knowledge, the first and only ice cream truck alternate mode in the whole franchise. This converted 1930s-ish truck doesn't seem to be based off of anything in particular, though I'd guess that it's based... White and pink suit an ice cream truck very well, and they're just very pleasing to the eye. It's as if it tasted like vanilla and strawberry if you lick it. This alternate mode is so chubby and cute, almost like it's made of scoops of ice cream itself. See, that's just how visionary Michael Bay was. Every design had an artistic purpose. The fenders and sideboards extend all the way to the ground, making them look like a parade float or something. Ice cream wouldn't be the weirdest thing I've gotten from a parade, believe you me. The amount of detail on this thing is rather quaint and impressive. The headlamps are separated from the fenders, and the lights are cast in translucent blue plastic, as are the front windows and windshield. As much as it's hard to find fault in the physical manifestation of God on Earth, I don't really like these windows, because these windows feature part of the locking mechanism that keeps SKIDS and MUDFLAP together, and, well, this certainly turns my popsicle into a soft serve. The alternate mode features a few tampagraphs that help sell the ice cream motif along, such as a big ice cream cone on the side paneling, creamy ice cream above the rear windows, an upside-down Autobot logo, and Comic fucking Sans. Made fresh for me? How thoughtful. The sculpt features a bunch of unpainted rust marks, which are really hard to notice unless you're looking really closely. On the roof is a small megaphone that's supposed to be able to swivel, but on my copy it just doesn't. Behind it is a big sculpted swirl of ice cream. Funnily enough, this is the one figure on my collection that would benefit from a literal cherry on top. SKIDS and MUDFLAP are the first Transformers figures I can think of that feature two robots turning into one whole vehicle since the days of Micromaster Combiners, and I'm happy that Hasbro spent time and effort promoting alternative lifestyles like this. While the clear plastic pegs on my SKIDS broke one after the other, there are multiple tabs that keep the two halves secured enough. SKIDS transformation is awkward and full of clashing parts. Just to bring the arms forward, you have to swivel the waist only a quarter turn. If you do the full half turn required, the arms can't come out at all. The hood pops up on an automorph that likes to go off at all the wrong times, and the majority of the mass of this half of the ice cream truck ends up folded away into a backpack. Due to the placement of his singular rear-view mirror, SKIDS' right shoulder is pretty much unable to move. MUDFLAP's transformation has fewer clashing parts, but is no less awkward. The conversion scheme is extremely panel-heavy, and many of the panels are placed at the end of long rods that are supposed to maneuver around each other and wrap around MUDFLAP's torso. I really like the two small panels that wrap around and tab in on MUDFLAP's chest. They were probably unnecessary, but they liven up the robot mode nicely, and the transformation step involving them is satisfying. MUDFLAP also has an automorph involving his head, but it's nowhere near as consequential or easy to use as SKIDS was. You can go back to vehicle mode without even priming it, and nothing really changes. The robot modes of Skids and MUDFLAP's ice cream van forms are quite different from just about every other incarnation of them I have in my collection. With the Revenge of the Fallen and Dark of the Moon figures, they're about the same in terms of proportions, they're just flipped symmetrically. But here, you got the stereotypical skinny one, fat one duo going on, with Skids looking awfully anemic, and MUDFLAP looking like he's put on a bit of winter weight, though that's mostly due to the fact that the front half of an ice cream truck has a lot less volume in which to hide a robot than the back half. Outside of their backpacks, their proportions in general are also inverted vertically. Skids has those heavy-set front fender shoulders like a running back, although his legs are about as small as a spider monkey's. MUDFLAP doesn't have much in the way of shoulder mass himself, though those broad kibble struts would like you to believe otherwise, but his lower legs are about the size of 3 tectonic plates each. One thing that bugs the hell out of me are the arms. Not the fact that they're asymmetrical, that doesn't bother me at all. In fact, that's one of the things I like the most about the twins. It's just that the arms on these figures are shit. Plain and simple. On each figure, the Kooming arm is nicely defined and has an articulated hand, but much like a Charger from Left 4 Dead 2, the opposite arm is nigh undetectable. They're practically unchanged panels from vehicle mode. The hands are barely sculpted in on either figure, as if it just wilted away from leprosy or got gnawed off during a late-night shrimp taco binge. That's not to say there aren't other things about the twins that I like. I adore the sunken-in grill on Skids, tucking away to provide a more athletic and powerful physique. Those armor plates on MUDFLAP don't stop him from looking like a fat piece of shit, though, but they definitely add to the visual interest. You might be looking at this thing a little funny because I leave his back kibble flaps draped against his back. I know that they're supposed to be brought up like this to emulate the door wings he'd have later on, but I just think they look incredibly dumb. On a completely unrelated note, the head sculpts on both of these figures are nicely detailed and film accurate, though the paintwork can be a little sloppy. Skids is lacking a gold tooth, though I'll admit that's a bit of a nitpick considering how well his eyes are painted. MUDFLAP has a splash of silver, haphazardly making a home on his ear, though I don't suspect he's noticed yet. One piece of trivia I learned long ago about Skids and MUDFLAP that I haven't been able to verify is that apparently these two were based off of 2 halves of the Autobot symbol. Putting them together I can kind of see it, but it's a major stretch. Most Transformers reviewers would probably play up a sneer and shout to the heavens, "What was Bay thinking?" But I feel a lot of nostalgia for Revenge of the Fallen, arguably even more than the 2007 film, and Skids and MUDFLAP are the comfiest part of that comfort food for me. Skids and MUDFLAP sure do have a lot of joints, but they're all shitty, and you can't really use them. Starting off with Skids, he has an incredibly tight ball joint that is extremely hard to turn in its socket. I mean, you can do it, but it just takes an exorbitant amount of pressure for something of this size. The shoulders have a joint that allows them to go outwards. It's rather a double joint due to transformation, as you can see in the armpit. And it kinda works. It only goes out this far, and as far as outward rotation in the shoulders go, this is as much as you get. As for forward and backwards, they go forwards a bit until the arm panels bang into the front fenders, at which case the ball-jointed elbow kicks in, and then you can bring it just a little bit higher, but it's not that great, and now his palm's sticking up. At the elbow, there's also a hinge joint that allows him to bend the elbow just a little bit until that bottom board hits the wheel. Really, the only elbow bend that you can reasonably get is this palm up sort of gesture, which is not really something Skids would do, but that's besides the point. On the big arm, his wrist can rotate inwards, like so. And that's about it. He does have a waist swivel, but it is severely hampered by the fact that there's a giant-ass bumper on that ass. The hips are ball-jointed, and they go forward a very nice degree. They kick real high, but they don't go far backward because of said bumper. The knees bend on a rather tight pin joint, and there is a swivel just below them to get some kind of facsimile of a thigh swivel. The ankles are ball jointed, but they don't really have too much of a range just because of their size, and that means it can act as a sort of swivel, however. And there's also an ankle pivot, which means that with the great range in his ball jointed hips, he can get some major crouching stances, but with the arms as they are, you're not going to get much use out of really anything. He's mostly just there to exist and look funny. Now, MUDFLAP. His head is also on a ball joint, but it's also connected to this rotating panel. And the panel has much less friction than the actual socket, so that means if you try to make him look up or down, it's just going to move the panel. But he does actually have a reasonable range on that ball-jointed neck. It can look up, it can look down, and it can look side to side. It's just that there's no way to lock this panel in place as far as I know. And that means moving his head can be a little bit of a chore because of all of the tiny parts. The shoulders are ball-jointed, but because of the nature of all this kibble, they are quite limited in their range. They only go about yay far in the forward axis, and they can move all the way out, though. They're pretty unimpeded. And for some reason, the entire shoulder assembly can move back and forth. It's on a pin joint right behind his head. I'm not really sure what the purpose of all this is supposed to be. Right above the elbow, there is a bicep swivel that rotates all the way around, and the elbows bend just a little under 90 degrees, which is fine in my book, and just like SKIDS, MUDFLAP's big hand can rotate inwards. There is no waist swivel, just due to the fact that the waist itself pegs in, and at this scale, I don't think there's any way to really get around that, so I'm not going to begrudge him for the lack of a waist swivel. It's not like SKIDS' was of much use anyway. The hips are ball-jointed, and just like SKIDS, they can kick very high, and with the lack of an ass bumper, they can move back pretty far too. The knees bend, but considering just how short the thigh is compared to the calf, it doesn't really do much of anything. Squatting does not really change his height much, and of course he can't really kneel because of just the sheer length of his calf and his foot. There is a swivel just under the knee, just like on SKIDS, and it's a little less useful just because of how big everything is down here. And finally, he has a toe joint that he can point upward or downward. So, SKIDS and MUDFLAP, they have a lot of joints. There are a lot of joints in MUDFLAP's kibble, which means you can set it to however you like, but I like it flush against the back. So, SKIDS and MUDFLAP have a lot of joints, but you can't really do anything with them. They're pretty static, I'd say. I haven't been able to eke out a nice pose out of them, and I've tried. So, if you're expecting articulation in your figures, you're going to be extremely disappointed with these two, but they are still pretty fun. I'll cut to the chase. The Ice Cream Twins are not a good toy. The transformation is clunky and cumbersome, claustrophobic, and just kind of unfun. Not to mention those brittle, clear plastic pegs which served as the primary way of keeping SKIDS and MUDFLAP together. The articulation is downright terrible at times and limited through the rest. Most Transformers fans steer clear of the twins in general for reasons I don't have to go into, and it's not helped by those ugly head designs. But this set is extremely interesting. It's the one and only ice cream truck Transformer, one which is also probably the largest take on the Micromaster Combiner idea that I can think of. And while the two separate robots are ugly, they're charming in a scrappy sort of way, and I adore them all the same. If I had to give a ranking based on pure quality, I'd probably give them the rank of crummy. But even so, I wholeheartedly recommend them, even if just as a novelty. If you liked this video or otherwise found it helpful or informative, then please subscribe for more reviews like this in the future, and feel free to suggest topics for future reviews in the comments. When we return, we'll be having a very special episode about smoking. This has been Kit Katastrophe. Transform and roll out.